Hi guys, today we are working on section 2 of chapter 5, which is the threats to biodiversity. Our 3 essential questions, you should be able to answer these by the end of the presentation. What are the threats to biodiversity? How is the current extinction rate different from background extinction rate? And how can the decline of a single species affect an entire ecosystem? Here are the vocabulary terms that you should have already written down. So let's start out by talking about extinction rates. The gradual process of a species becoming extinct is known as background extinction. Scientists aren't concerned about this at all. It's a natural process, but they are, however, concerned about the increasing rate of extinctions. A mass extinction is an event in which a large percentage of all living species become extinct in a relatively short period of time. So here we have a table that details the estimated number of extinctions since 1600s. So we have mainland populations, island populations, ocean populations, total, the approximate number of species, and the percentage of those species that have gone extinct. So roughly 2% of mammals have gone extinct since 1600, about 1.3% of birds, 0.3% of reptiles, 0.05% amphibians, 0.1% fish, 0.01% invertebrates, and 0.2% flowering plants. You should also note that an alarming decrease of An alarming decrease of amphibian population has occurred since the 1970s, and many species might be on the verge of extinction. Factors that threaten biodiversity. The current high rate of extinction is due to the activities of a single species, Homo sapiens, also called humans. Humans are changing conditions on Earth faster than new traits can evolve. So if we're doing it faster than those new traits can evolve, then those populations are going to go extinct. Natural resources are the materials and organisms found in the biosphere, including minerals, fossil fuels, nuclear fuels, plants, animals, soil, clean water, clean air, and solar energy. So those are things that occur naturally on the Earth, and humans are using them at a very high rate. Factors that threaten biodiversity. Overexploitation. That was one of your vocab terms. One factor that contributes to the rise in extinction rate is overexploitation, or excessive use of a species that have economic value. So here are some species that have been affected by overexploitation. Bison. Bison's a big one. You probably remember from history class that bison very nearly went extinct. The Plains Indians relied heavily on them for food, for shelter, because they would use the hides. So the bison was a big part of their culture, and settlers would just hunt them for sport, would just hunt them, shoot them, and then leave them there dead. Another one is passenger pigeons, the ocelot. Ocelot, if you get a chance, Google that. It's adorable. And rhinoceros. I believe the black rhinoceros, the last female, has died. So there's no way that we're going to get more of them. Other factors that threaten biodiversity. Habitat loss. Destruction of habitat, such as clearing tropical rainforest, has a direct impact on global biodiversity. That is because most of the biodiversity, most of the different species of animals on the planet occur in the tropical rainforest. They just have a lot of variety of species there, and if we're clear cutting it, then we are cutting down on our biodiversity. Also, disruption of habitat, such as overfishing, can start a chain reaction and affect an entire ecosystem. So you'll notice that fish are the kind of the bottom, not the absolute bottom, but near the bottom of the food web, of the food pyramid in the ocean. So if we fish too much, if we remove too many of those from the environment, it's going to have an effect on the sea lions, which eat them. And then an effect on the killer whales that eat the sea lions and the seals that eat the fish. And you can see that that is just a cycle. Okay, we decrease the fish, we decrease the sea lion and the seals, we decrease the killer whales, and it just has a detrimental effect on that environment. Another factor that threatens biodiversity is the fragmentation of a habitat. That is the separation of an ecosystem into small pieces of land. Okay, so we have a piece of land here, nice big piece of land, but we have to build 2 roads through it. So we have increased the amount of edges of that environment. So we now have a lot more edges. We have a road going through the middle. Think about it. If we had roads crisscrossing every bit of the land in St. Francis County, we're going to have a lot more animals hit by cars because they are coming into contact with those cars. That's how they die. They get hit. So that's decreasing their population, which is going to have an effect on the food chain. Fragmentation of habitat. Problems with fragmentation. Smaller parcels of land support fewer species. It reduces the opportunity for individuals in one area to reproduce with others from another because they can't get to each other. And because they can't get to each other, that decreases the genetic diversity, because you're not having the random shuffling of traits. We're going to talk about that more often later this year whenever we get to genetics, but we're not getting the mixture of different DNA in offspring. And this creates more edges. The edge effects are different environmental conditions experienced at the boundaries of ecosystems. So the edge of an ecosystem looks different than the very center part of it. And so that affects the organisms that live there. Another factor is pollution. Pollution changes the composition of air, soil, and water. Biological magnification is the increasing concentration of toxic substances in organisms as trophic levels increase in a food chain or a food web. So you'll notice down here at the bottom, we have a very small concentration of DDT. Well, producers in that ecosystem, in the water, they absorb that DDT. Now, it's not enough to hurt them, but the zooplankton eats those producers, and you can see, since they eat a lot of those producers, the concentration of DDT in that zooplankton goes up. Well, that zooplankton gets eaten by small fish. They have to eat a lot of zooplankton, so they get more of it. They have a higher concentration. Well, then those small fish get eaten by the large fish. That large fish, he's getting quite a bit of the DDT in his system. So whenever he gets eaten by a bird, all right, that bird has to eat multiple fish to survive. So that bird absorbs all of the DDT that's in that large fish and every large fish that it eats, which leads to the poisoning of that bird. So yeah, it might start out as a small amount of pollution, but over time it becomes magnified. It gets concentrated through that food chain. Another threat to biodiversity is pollution. One type of pollution is acid precipitation or acid rain. That occurs when sulfur and nitrogen compounds react with water and other substances in the air to form sulfuric acid or nitric acid. So whenever we pollute the air, that gets mixed in with the water and creates acid. That acid then removes calcium, potassium, and other nutrients from the soil. So whenever that acid rain falls, it reacts with the soil and it deprives plants of the nutrients that are necessary for it to grow. The acid can also damage leaves on trees and on plants, making it harder for them to survive. Eutrophication. This is when nitrogen-rich compounds or phosphorus-rich compounds flow into waterways, causing extensive algae growth. So you get a lot of algae, and you might think, Miss Ferris, that's good because algae, it's taking carbon dioxide out of the air, and that's a good thing. Well, not really, because that algae then use up the oxygen supply in the water during their rapid growth, which causes there to be less oxygen in the water, and that can cause other organisms to suffocate. When the algae dies, because there's not enough nutrients for it, because they used it all up, whenever they die and decomposition occurs, that takes up oxygen too. And so it's a dual problem. So they're taking the oxygen out of the water whenever they're alive and when they are dead. So organisms in the water will suffocate. Another factor is introduced species. They are non-native species that are either intentionally or unintentionally transported to a new habitat. They usually reproduce in large numbers because there's a lack of predators. There's nothing there naturally that is going to harm them, that's going to keep their population under control. An estimated 40% of the extinctions that have occurred since 1750 are a result of introduced species. Down here we have a map of the southern United States showing the range expansion of imported fire ants from 1918 to 2005. So they've had to limit the transport of goods across county lines to help stop the spread of fire ants. You may have noticed signs that say no firewood transportation out of this county. That's because that county has a bug or some kind of insect or disease in their trees that they don't want to spread to other counties. So they limit the amount of firewood that can be transported from county to county. And that is it, guys. There are the essential questions again, so hopefully you can answer all of those by now, and the vocabulary terms are listed there if you need them. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or talk to me in class tomorrow.